She only had 100 days left to live. He had everything but love. Their worlds collided when a dying mother made a deal with a cold-hearted millionaire to marry him and save his mother's life in exchange for a future for her daughter. What started as a contract became something no one expected. A love so real, it could break hearts, heal wounds, and outlive time itself. The late morning sun warmed the patio of a trendy rooftop cafe in downtown Seattle. Across from Ethan Carter sat a woman with perfect waves in her hair, her fingers delicately tracing the rim of a champagne flute. She was smiling, until Ethan slid a velvet box across the table. She gasped, "Is this?" Inside was a delicate necklace, white gold with a single sapphire. Before she could speak again, Ethan's voice cut through the air like ice. "It is a goodbye gift," he said plainly. The woman blinked, smile fading. "I am sorry? What?" "I am ending this," Ethan said, his gaze detached. "We were convenient, that is all." Before she could process the words, Ethan stood up, adjusted his blazer, and walked away without a backward glance. She sat there, stunned, the necklace sparkling under the sunlight, now nothing but a cruel punctuation. Minutes later, on a nearby street, Rachel Miller was walking hand in hand with her 7-year-old daughter Sophie. They had just left the public library carrying a bag of borrowed children's books. Rachel looked tired, her eyes sunken from too many late-night shifts at the diner, her clothes clean but worn. But Sophie beamed, chattering about the panda story she loved. Suddenly, a meow cut through the air. A small kitten, trembling, in the middle of the road. Without thinking, Sophie let go of her mother's hand and darted into the street. "Sophie!" Rachel screamed. Just as a luxury car turned the corner, speeding toward them. Rachel ran after her daughter, arms outstretched. From the other direction, Ethan was still in his car, glancing at his phone. The screech of tires. Rachel reached Sophie just in time, yanking her to the side and wrapping her body around hers. The car missed them by inches. Sophie, overwhelmed by shock, fainted. Rachel cradled her on the pavement, heart pounding. The car door slammed. Ethan stormed over. "What the hell are you doing? You could have gotten her killed!" Rachel looked up, shaking, still holding Sophie. She saw the kitten. She did not think. "You are her mother," Ethan snapped. "Start acting like it." Rachel did not reply. She was too busy checking her daughter's pulse, whispering to her, "Come on, baby, please wake up." For a moment, Ethan's eyes flickered. Something about the desperation in Rachel's voice unsettled him. An ambulance siren wailed in the distance. Rachel lifted her daughter into her arms and whispered again, "Hold on, sweetheart. Mama is right here." Ethan stood frozen as the world slowed around him. He did not know it yet, but in that instant, his life had collided with hers forever. The emergency room buzzed with fluorescent lights and murmuring voices. Rachel sat beside Sophie's bed, her daughter still unconscious, but stable. A thin curtain separated them from the rest of the world. Rachel's hands trembled as she smoothed Sophie's hair. The doctor approached, clipboard in hand. "No serious injuries, just fainted from the shock," he said. "But we should keep her under observation for a few hours." Rachel nodded, biting her lip. "Thank you, doctor, but I cannot afford a hospital stay." The doctor hesitated. "I understand, but right now your daughter needs rest. We will work something out." Rachel sat silently, staring at her shoes. Over on the other side of the curtain, Ethan paced near the nurse's station. He was irritated, trying to make a phone call. "Yes, I am at Harborview Medical. Someone ran into my car. No damage, but a child got hurt. I do not want this to become a liability." He turned and froze. Rachel was walking toward him, Sophie in her arms, struggling under her weight. "I am sorry to bother you," she said quietly, "but I do not have a ride. Can you just drop us off?" Ethan stared at her. "Excuse me?" "You were there? She fainted after the scare. I cannot afford an Uber right now, and my bike was stolen last week." He narrowed his eyes. "You expect me to drive you after nearly turning my car into a lawsuit?" Rachel looked down. I am not asking for money, just a ride. He scoffed. Get in the car. The ride was silent. Sophie rested against Rachel's shoulder, a bandage on her elbow. The car's leather interior contrasted harshly with Rachel's frayed jeans and thrift store hoodie. At a stoplight, Ethan finally spoke. Let me guess, single mom, working 2 jobs, barely scraping by. Rachel did not respond. He reached into the center console, pulled out a wad of cash, and dropped it onto her lap. There, that should cover your inconvenience, and maybe your rent. Rachel's face flushed. I did not ask for this. No, he said coldly, but I know the game. You use the kid to guilt people into helping you. Rachel clenched her jaw, voice trembling. She is not a pawn. As the car pulled over, Ethan opened her door. Take the money, and do not ever show up near me again. Rachel stepped out, holding Sophie close, the bills untouched on the seat. The door slammed, the car vanished. Rachel stood on the curb, trembling. She whispered to Sophie, It is okay. Mama's got you. We are fine. But they were not fine. That same night, she opened the nearly empty refrigerator, stared at a lone jar of peanut butter, and closed it again. She sat by the window while Sophie slept, the city lights blinking like reminders of dreams long buried. She had been judged before, by creditors, by neighbors, by strangers. But this man's words stung deeper, and though she did not know it yet, life had plans to throw them together again in ways neither of them could imagine. Rachel's fingers trembled as she wiped down the countertop for the 5th time. The night shift at Grace's diner was slow, and the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead only made the silence feel heavier. Sophie lay curled in a booth in the corner, wrapped in a faded jacket, her tiny chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm. Clara, Rachel's best friend and owner of the adjacent nail salon, poked her head through the kitchen door. You okay? Rachel forced a smile. Just tired. Clara studied her. You look pale. Paler than usual. You eat anything today? Rachel shrugged. There was a banana, I think. Clara sighed. Girl, you cannot run on fumes and worry. Before Rachel could respond, a commotion arose near the back entrance. The restaurant manager was rushing someone through the rear hallway, a tall man with sharp features and furrowed brows. Rachel turned just in time to recognize him. Ethan Carter. He was not dressed for business tonight. Jeans, a simple black jacket, but still carrying that same air of expensive indifference. He headed straight for the private office. Rachel inched closer, curious. From behind the cracked door, voices floated out. Ethan was speaking to Grace, the restaurant owner and his longtime family friend. I need a liver donor, urgently, Ethan said. Grace's voice was steady. You know how complicated this is, Ethan. You cannot just pay someone off. I do not care what it costs. I will marry her, fake the paperwork. Just get the hospital to accept the donation as family-based. Grace was silent for a long moment. You are playing with fire, she said. Rachel's heart pounded, her stomach sank. Her hands curled into fists as she whispered to herself, he wants to pay someone to marry him. For a liver. She should have walked away. But desperation has a strange sound. It echoes in hollow pockets of courage. When Ethan stepped out of the office, Rachel was waiting in the hallway. He stopped in his tracks. You, he said, clearly annoyed. Rachel spoke before she could stop herself. I will do it. He frowned. Do what? I will marry you? There was a pause, the kind that stretches across time. Ethan laughed once. You are insane. I am not, Rachel said quietly. I heard what you said. I have O-negative blood, universal donor. I get tested every year for Sophie. You want to sell your liver to me? No, she said firmly. I want to leave something behind for my daughter. I have a brain tumor. Terminal. Maybe 6 months, maybe less. Ethan stared at her, silent. She met his eyes. You give me enough to secure Sophie's future. I give your mother a chance to live, and I sign whatever papers you need." "You are asking me to buy your death," he muttered. "No, I am offering you what little I have left." Grace stepped out behind him, her face pale. "Rachel?" "I have already made peace with this," Rachel said. Ethan looked at her, his face unreadable. Then he turned away, pacing once. He finally muttered, "Get tested, tomorrow. If the match works, we talk." Rachel exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. She turned away, returned to the kitchen, and quietly pulled Sophie's jacket tighter around her. For the first time in years, she had hope. Fragile, flawed, but real. And Ethan Carter had just stepped into a contract far more binding than any he had ever signed. The loft was sleek and cold, the kind of place where silence echoed louder than footsteps. White leather furniture, stainless steel kitchen, abstract art on the walls that cost more than Rachel's monthly rent. Sophie stood frozen just inside the door, holding a stuffed rabbit with one missing eye. Ethan stood by the island, arms crossed, looking like he had made a mistake. "This is not permanent," he said, "just until the paperwork is processed, and until the surgery." Rachel gave a small nod, understood. Sophie tugged her sleeve. "Is this the rich man's house?" Ethan arched a brow. "I am standing right here." Sophie tilted her head. "Are you always this grumpy?" Ethan blinked. "Excuse me?" Rachel stifled a laugh. "Sophie." But Ethan, for once, did not snap back. He simply walked away, muttering, "Guest room's down the hall, third door on the right." That night, Rachel lay awake on crisp linen sheets, her daughter curled beside her. The ceiling above was smooth, silent. Her old apartment had a crack that looked like a snake, and the neighbors upstairs stomped as if training elephants. Here, everything was too clean, too distant. In the morning, Ethan returned from a run, shirt damp, hair tousled, breath steady. Sophie stared at him as he poured black coffee into a glass mug. "Me too. Do you look like a superhero?" Ethan paused. "What?" "You look like the ones in Mom's old magazines, with sad eyes and perfect teeth." Rachel nearly choked on her toast. Ethan looked at Sophie, unsure if he had just been complimented or insulted. "Do you always talk like this?" "Yes," Sophie said. "Do you always act like you forgot how to smile?" That time Rachel did not stifle the laugh. Even Ethan let out something close to a chuckle. Over the next few days, routines formed. Rachel cooked breakfast. Sophie did her homework at the island counter. Ethan pretended not to watch them from behind his tablet. One evening, as Rachel set down plates of roasted chicken, Ethan leaned against the counter. "You cook like someone who had no choice." Rachel shrugged. "I did not. When you are broke, creativity is the only spice you have." "Fair enough," Ethan said. Rachel looked up. "You do not have to eat with us, you know. We will not be offended." Ethan hesitated. "Maybe I want to." Sophie giggled. "He is changing." Rachel arched an eyebrow. "Into what?" Sophie whispered. "Into a human?" The table filled with laughter. Real laughter, not forced, not polite. Later that night, Ethan stood outside their door, listening to Rachel read Sophie a story. Her voice was soft, steady, comforting. When she reached the last page, she paused. "I hope." "You always remember how strong you are, baby," she whispered. Sophie murmured, "I will." Ethan stepped away before they could know he had been standing there. The contract was simple, on paper, a few signatures, a scheduled surgery, a quiet exit. But nothing about Rachel was simple, and nothing about Sophie was quiet. And Ethan, for the first time in years, felt the corners of his world bend toward warmth, toward a woman who cooked because she had nothing else to offer, toward a child who looked at him like he was more than money. And somewhere, deep inside, the man who swore never to care again started to forget that he was only pretending. The luxury of peace never lasts. Ethan's father, Henry Carter, arrived unannounced. He stepped into the loft like a storm in a tailored suit, eyes scanning everything with disdain. When his gaze fell on Rachel, seated at the dining table helping Sophie with homework, it lingered just long enough to make her feel erased. "I see the rumors are true," Henry said. "You married the help." Ethan stepped between them. "You do not get to speak to her like that." Rachel stood slowly. "I can leave." "You are not going anywhere," Ethan replied, not taking his eyes off his father. Henry walked toward the window. "Your mother's transplant is in 2 weeks. The board has concerns about this. Marriage. I will not let you ruin the Carter name over some what?" Ethan snapped. Rachel held Sophie's hand tightly, her heart pounding. Henry turned. "Divorce her, or I will make sure you are disinherited by morning." Ethan said nothing. Later that night, Rachel sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the small pill bottle in her hand. Her head ached, her vision blurred at times, and the numbness in her fingers returned more frequently now. She had not told anyone, not Ethan, not Clara. She flushed the pills and walked back into the living room. Sophie was asleep on the couch, one hand clutching a crayon. Ethan stood near the bookshelf, staring at an old photograph of his parents, back when smiles looked real. "I am sorry," Rachel said. "For what?" "For being a problem, for being in the way." "You are not." She hesitated. "If this gets too messy, you can back out. I will understand." Ethan looked at her. "And let my mother die?" Rachel exhaled slowly. "This is not love. This is paperwork. You owe me nothing." "I know," he said. But in his eyes, something deeper stirred. The next morning, Rachel went for testing alone. The doctors confirmed her tumor had grown. The recommended treatment, aggressive chemotherapy, was expensive and would leave her weak. She refused it. "I cannot afford months of bed rest," she told the oncologist. "My daughter needs me." He gave her a tired look. "She needs a living mother." Rachel left in silence. Back at the loft, she hid the medical papers under her mattress. Meanwhile, Henry Carter called a private investigator. Within days, he had Rachel's full history. The bankruptcy, the unpaid bills, the funeral expenses from her late husband's accident. He presented them to Ethan like a deck of accusations. "This is who you are marrying?" he sneered. Ethan stared at the file. "I do not care." "You should. I know her better than you ever knew Mom." Henry's face darkened. "You are making a mistake." "No," Ethan said. "I made one the day I let you tell me what to care about." That night, Rachel and Ethan sat on the rooftop, city lights glittering below them. Sophie was asleep inside. Rachel looked at Ethan. "Why are you still here?" He answered without looking at her, "Because you are still here." The world was pushing hard, but somehow, two broken people had found a corner of quiet where they did not need to pretend. And neither of them wanted to let it go. The leaves outside the loft turned golden. Autumn settled in Seattle, crisp and beautiful. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and butter. Rachel stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, humming a lullaby. Sophie sat on the counter beside her, swinging her legs, holding a bowl of blueberries. Ethan entered from the hallway, hair still damp from a shower. He paused at the sight. "Morning," Rachel said without turning. He nodded, watching the sunlight hit her face as she plated breakfast. Sophie beamed. "We are making smiley pancakes." Ethan took a seat, watching as Rachel placed one in front of him. A perfect circle, with blueberry eyes and a banana slice smile. "You made this for me?" he asked. "No," Rachel said, smirking. "That one was a mistake. Yours is next." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that caught even himself off guard. After breakfast, Ethan walked Sophie to the nearby park. They tossed leaves into the air, watched squirrels chase each other up trees. As Rachel watched them from a bench, her chest tightened. Not from illness, but something deeper. A longing. That night, Rachel sat in the bathroom again, staring at the mirror. Her fingers had gone numb twice that day, She had forgotten where she left the car keys, twice. Her body was whispering warnings she could no longer ignore. She opened the cabinet, pulled out the medical report she had hidden from Ethan. She traced the words, "Tumor progression noted. Prognosis poor." Behind the door, she heard Ethan's voice. "I will read tonight, so you lie back." His voice was softer now, warmer. Rachel closed the cabinet. Later, she found Ethan on the balcony, reading a manuscript. He looked up when she approached. "Gold out here," she said. He stood and took off his coat. "Here." She hesitated before accepting it. "You do not have to keep being this nice." "I know." He stared at her for a long moment. "You are not just Sophie's mom anymore. You are not just part of a deal. You are part of my day." "Every part." Rachel swallowed. "Do not say that." "Yemel?" "Because I do not have time for hope. I cannot fall into something that has no future." "Maybe the future is not the point," Ethan said quietly. "Maybe it is the now." She stepped away, retreating back inside. Ethan stood alone, the coat still warm in her hands. Days passed. The transplant day grew closer. Ethan started leaving work early. He canceled meetings. He brought home takeout when Rachel was too tired to cook. When she fell asleep on the couch, he covered her with a blanket and stayed nearby, reading until dawn. Sophie noticed. "Do you love Mommy now?" she asked one evening while coloring at the table. Ethan glanced at Rachel, asleep nearby. "I think I do," he whispered. Sophie smiled. "Good, because she needs someone to love her when she forgets." "What do you mean?" "She told me sometimes her head hurts so much she forgets words. I help her remember." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. That night, he found the medical papers under Rachel's mattress. He read every word. Slowly. Painfully. He sat by her side and watched her sleep. And when she stirred, he took her hand. "You should have told me," he whispered. "I could not," she said. "I did not want your pity." "You think I am here out of pity?" "No," she said. "But if you knew, you would look at me like I am already gone." "I do not," he said. "I see you right here, breathing, fighting. I do not want Sophie to watch me fade." Ethan's voice broke. "Then let me hold you while you are still bright." Rachel closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. And for the first time she let herself fall into the arms of the man she had once thought cold. And into the moment. Into love. Knowing it would not last forever made it more real. More necessary. More sacred. The hospital room was sterile and silent. Rachel sat by the window, watching leaves drift from the trees outside. Her surgery was scheduled in 72 hours. She could feel it approaching like a shadow. Slow, steady, unstoppable. Ethan walked in carrying 2 cups of chamomile tea. He handed one to her. "You did not have to come again," she said. He sat beside her. "I know, but I wanted to." They sipped in silence for a moment before Ethan asked, "Did you tell Sophie?" Rachel shook her head. "I cannot. She is too young to understand what liver transplant means, let alone that I might not make it through." "She is smarter than people think," Ethan replied. "She already knows something is wrong." Rachel looked down at her tea. "I wanted her to have as many good memories as possible before the truth stains everything." Ethan reached for her hand. "She already has 100 good memories. Every pancake, every bedtime story, every laugh in this past month. You gave her more than some kids get in years." Rachel blinked fast, forcing the tears back. Just then, the door burst open. Henry Carter. Followed by Claire Carter, Ethan's mother, pale, weak but alert. She stood holding a medical folder. "What is she doing here?" Henry snapped. Ethan stood up. "Dad?" "No," Henry said, slamming a document onto the table. "This whole marriage is fraud. I had the papers reviewed by my lawyers. You married a woman for a medical favor. That is not love. It is a transaction. It could invalidate the donor approval." Claire's voice was soft, but sharp. "Henry, stop!" "No," he insisted. "She is manipulating you, Ethan. Do you even know she is dying?" Rachel stood, stunned. "You had me investigated?" she asked, her voice cracking. Henry scoffed. "Of course I did. You think I would let someone like you waltz into our family without digging first?" Rachel turned to Ethan. "You knew?" Ethan hesitated. "I found out days ago, and you said nothing. I was waiting for the right moment." "The right moment to tell me you pitied me." Rachel's voice rose, tears streaming now. "I do not pity you," Ethan said quickly. She cut him off. "You should have told me. I trusted you." Claire stepped forward. "Rachel, please, I did not know he would come like this. I just wanted to say thank you. You were giving me a chance to live." Rachel backed away. "I am not some tragic heroine. I am a mother. I'm a woman who made a choice. But this is not love. This is humiliation." She stormed out of the room. Ethan followed her through the hallway. "Rachel," she turned sharply, "I cannot breathe around you right now. I do not know where the truth ends and your performance begins." Ethan's voice was low, but pleading. "I was not pretending." You were silent. "I was scared." She shook her head. "You are not the only one." Rachel turned and walked away. That night, Ethan returned to an empty loft. Sophie's drawings were still taped to the fridge. A note sat on the counter, written in Rachel's handwriting. "I need to protect what time I have left. Please do not follow me. Tell Sophie her mother loves her more than anything in this world." Ethan stood alone in the kitchen. The light from the refrigerator flickered as the door clicked shut. And for the first time in years, the man who had built walls around his heart felt them collapse. In silence. In grief. In love, lost too soon. It had been 4 days since Rachel disappeared. 4 days of silence. 4 days of Sophie waking up and walking to the bedroom door, only to find it still closed, still empty. Ethan had called every number Rachel had ever dialed from the house phone. He had gone to Clara's nail salon twice. No one had seen her. Not even her landlord had any answers. Just a note that her lease had been ended early and the unit had already been cleared. Ethan sat on the living room floor late that night, Sophie beside him, tracing circles on the carpet with her fingers. "Do you think Mommy left because she was mad at me?" Sophie asked, her voice a soft whisper. Ethan turned to her quickly. "No, never. Your mom loves you more than anything." "Then why did she not say goodbye?" Ethan hesitated. "Sometimes, when people are hurting, they try to protect the ones they love by hiding the hurt, even when it feels wrong." Sophie said nothing. The next morning, Ethan woke to find Sophie gone. Panic surged in his chest as he searched every room. Her jacket was missing, so were her boots. He called Clara, then the school, then the police. 30 minutes later, he received a call. "Mr. Carter," a calm female voice said, "your daughter is here at Channel 7 News. She walked in and asked to speak to someone about finding her mother." Ethan rushed downtown. When he arrived, Sophie was sitting in a chair in the lobby, swinging her legs, talking to a reporter. She spotted Ethan and waved. The reporter stood to greet him. "Mr. Carter, your daughter, she's extraordinary. She told us her mom is sick, that she disappeared after trying to help someone, and that she just wants her back." Ethan knelt down beside Sophie. "What did you say?" "I said you are rich and can build apps and stuff," Sophie explained matter-of-factly. "But I am little, and people listen to little kids if they look sad enough." Ethan blinked. "What?" He said, "Mommy saved your mom's life, so someone should help us save hers. Maybe someone on TV knows where she went." The reporter cleared her throat. "Actually, we aired the footage an hour ago, and someone called in. A nurse at St. Vincent's Community Hospital." Ethan's heart leapt. He drove straight there with Sophie in the back seat, holding her stuffed rabbit tightly. The nurse met them at the front desk. She came in 2 days ago, signed herself in under her maiden name, said she wanted palliative care, refused aggressive treatment. She looked tired. Ethan entered the hospital room quietly. Rachel lay curled beneath a blanket, her skin pale, her eyes closed. Sophie rushed in before he could stop her. "Mommy!" Rachel's eyes fluttered open. Her voice cracked. "Sophie?" Sophie climbed onto the bed and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. "I missed you," she whispered. "Please come home." Rachel looked over Sophie's shoulder and saw Ethan standing in the doorway, eyes full of something between fury and heartbreak. "You should not be here," she said. Ethan walked in. "You should not have left." "I had to." "You did not." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I was not strong enough to say goodbye, so I thought disappearing would hurt less." Sophie looked between them. "You are both silly." Rachel laughed through tears. Ethan reached for her hand. "You are not alone anymore. You do not have to protect us from the pain. We want to face it with you." "I do not know how much time I have left," she said, softly. "Then let us make every second count," he said. Rachel pulled Sophie close, her hand still gripping Ethan's. Outside the room, nurses paused to watch the reunion. 3 broken pieces, mending in the softest way possible, not by force, but by the love of a child who refused to let the world take her mother away without a fight. The transplant had gone successfully. Claire Carter, Ethan's mother, lay in recovery. Her color had returned and her hands no longer trembled as they had in those final days. Rachel's liver donation, a partial graft, had taken well. The doctors were stunned by the speed of Claire's recovery. "She is stronger than we expected," the lead surgeon said. "There is no sign of rejection. The transplant was clean." Rachel, on the other hand, had collapsed 2 days later. The cumulative damage from the stress, the hidden tumor in her brain, the ongoing symptoms, everything had finally caught up. She was moved into critical care, drifting in and out of consciousness. Ethan never left her side. "I will not let you go," he whispered, his fingers brushing her cheek. "You saved my mom, you saved Sophie, you saved me." For the first time in years, he knelt at a hospital chapel and prayed. Not for a miracle, but for time. 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week. Just more time to love her the way he never learned to love anyone else. The morning after Rachel fell unconscious, a second miracle arrived. Dr. Kim, the neuro-oncologist, rushed into Ethan's waiting room, waving a printed scan. "We just got the results from the imaging we ran last week before the collapse. There is a treatment option, an experimental immunotherapy trial, targeted, risky, but showing real promise for patients with Rachel's tumor type." Ethan sat up. "Can she be part of it?" Dr. Kim nodded. "There is an open slot. She qualifies, but she needs to start within 72 hours. Ethan did not hesitate. "Do it." He signed every form. He read every side effect. He stayed awake all night beside her hospital bed as the first infusion dripped slowly into her veins. When Rachel woke the next morning, her throat dry and voice thin, she whispered, "Did I die?" Ethan grinned through tears. "You got married. That was enough drama for 1 week." Rachel blinked. "Married?" He reached into his pocket and held up a simple silver ring. "You said yes, you wore a white dress, you cried during the vows. I did too." She smiled faintly. "Sounds like me." Ethan kissed her forehead. "We are going to try something new." Was that living? Over the next 10 days, Rachel's body fought. She vomited through her second round of treatment. Her vision blurred, her hair began to thin, but the tumor, slowly, began to shrink. Claire visited every day, sometimes just sitting by the bed in silence. One afternoon, she reached over and took Rachel's hand. "You gave me life, Rachel. Now let us fight for yours." Sophie drew pictures every day, stick figures of a girl and a boy holding hands, with a little heart floating above them. "Is that us?" Rachel asked once. "No," Sophie said. "That is your future. You and Daddy, holding on." 2 weeks later, When Rachel took her first unassisted step down the hallway, the entire nursing staff clapped. Ethan was waiting at the end of the corridor, arms wide open. She fell into them, laughing. "We are going to make it, Rachel," he whispered. "We already are," she said. That evening, Ethan arranged a quiet ceremony in the hospital garden. Just them. Rachel in a borrowed cardigan. Ethan in his wrinkled shirt from the night he slept on the floor. Sophie between them, holding both their hands. And as the sun sank into the Seattle skyline, they promised to love each other, not for a perfect life, but for whatever life they had left. Together, 1 year later, Seattle was blooming. The cherry trees near Green Lake Park had begun to blossom, dusting the sidewalks with soft pink petals. Laughter echoed across the water as children ran along the shore, chasing kites. Inside a cozy cafe just off the main street, the corner table near the window was reserved. A small hand pressed against the glass. "Mommy, look, it is the same lady with the tiny dog again." Rachel turned from her seat, smiling. Her cheeks were fuller. Her eyes no longer carried the shadows they once had. Her hair had started to grow back. Soft, curly, and full of life. The trial had not just bought her time. It had changed her prognosis. She was no longer living with a countdown. She was living. Ethan entered with a tray of hot chocolate, sliding into the seat across from her. He leaned over and kissed her cheek. "Dr. Evans just texted," he said. "Latest scan looks clean, no new growth, stable." Rachel exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding her breath for an entire year. Sophie climbed into her lap. "Does that mean we can go camping this summer?" Rachel laughed. "Only if you promise not to bring 7 stuffed animals again." "They need the woods too," Sophie argued. Ethan raised a brow. "What if we bring just 2? Sophie pouted. "Fine." Rachel shook her head. "Deal." Outside the cafe window, the world moved on. Cars passing, people walking, phones ringing. But inside their bubble, time had slowed. "Do you remember this place?" Rachel asked quietly. Ethan looked around. "First date we never admitted was a date. First time I laughed and almost choked on a biscotti. First time I noticed your laugh lines and realized I wanted to memorize every single one." Rachel's voice softened. "You were so serious then. You terrified me." She grinned. "You were terrified of a waitress?" "No. I was terrified of someone making me want more." Rachel reached into her purse and pulled out a folded note. Ethan frowned. "What is that?" "A letter. For Sophie. In case the worst happened." He stared at it. "I do not need it anymore," she said, handing it to him. "But I want her to have it someday, as a reminder of where we came from." Ethan nodded, eyes glassy. That evening, back home, they cooked together. Rachel chopping onions with mock drama, Ethan setting the table, Sophie organizing forks by color instead of size. When dinner was done, they danced. Not to music, just to laughter. And at bedtime, when Sophie asked for a story, Rachel curled beside her in bed and told her the one that began with a fake marriage and ended with a real one. "But how did it really end?" Sophie asked. Rachel smiled. "It did not," Ethan answered from the doorway. "It is still going." Later that night, on the balcony under a sky full of stars, Rachel leaned into Ethan's chest. "You know what I used to fear the most?" she asked. "Losing time," he guessed. "No," she said, "wasting it." He kissed her temple. "And now? I think we are finally using it right." Far below them, the city pulsed with light and movement. But in their little corner of the world, everything was still. Full circle. Alive. And beginning again. Sometimes, the most beautiful love stories are not the ones that begin with fireworks, but the ones born in quiet hospital rooms, forged in tears, and held together by the laughter of a child. Rachel and Ethan never planned to fall in love. They were brought together by pain, by chance, and by sacrifice. But in walking through the darkest days, hand in hand, they discovered something far more powerful than fate. A choice to stay, to fight, and to love, despite the fear. If this story touched your heart, If it reminded you that hope is never truly gone even when it hides behind hospital curtains or goodbye letters, then do one small thing today. Subscribe to our channel, because here we share not just stories, but lives, and reminders that sometimes, in the most ordinary people, you will find the most extraordinary love. Click subscribe and join us for more soul-stirring stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Thank you for watching. And remember, every second you choose love is a second well spent.